The Boys is arguably one of the best TV shows airing right now. It is certainly one of the most prolific, and I think one of the reasons The Boys is so excellent is due to its casting. Ask most people who the best character in The Boys is, and you'll usually receive one of two answers. It will either be Carl Urban as Billy Butcher, or Anthony Starr as Homelander. Although after season 3, quite a few people like to mention Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy. But that's besides the point. Carl Urban was probably the biggest name attached to The Boys when it started airing, with him appearing in quite a few big-name films, and since I mentioned him, Jensen Ackles was also very famous for his leading performance in the hit show Supernatural, which ran for a lot of seasons. However, to a lot of people, this was their first time seeing Anthony Starr, and he most certainly left an impression. Homelander, at this current moment in time, is an iconic character, and he would not have been had it not been for Anthony Starr's terrifying, yet also pathetic portrayal of Homelander. To a lot of people, this is his star-making character. Yes, the pun was intended. However, Anthony Starr is a New Zealand actor in his mid-40s. He did not just come out of nowhere. Like Carl Urban and Jensen Ackles, he had worked on many other projects. When looking at his filmography, there is one show that sticks out. It's a show that everyone that has watched it cries as being underrated and deserving of your time. Now this feedback, as well as the IMDb score for the show, was enough to get me interested. But then you tell me that he plays the lead character in the show? Now you have my attention. Banshee was nothing like I expected it to be. After hearing all this praise and seeing the IMDb score, not just for the show but also for certain episodes, I was very excited for the show and my expectations were through the roof. It's these expectations that led to me being initially disappointed with the show. Perhaps it was because I just watched Barry, which was another show that I'd heard was really great and underrated, but I just did not like the first episode. This is my own fault and not the show's, since I have a certain expectation when people say a show is one of the best ever made, and Banshee did not meet it. At least in its first episode. It was very schlocky and pulpy with some weird editing choices, and the camera just wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't even an action sequence, it was just two dudes talking and the camera kept swaying around. I think it's important to mention this so that you can measure your expectations in a way that I didn't, because there is a lot in Banshee that a lot of people will bounce right off of. I'll get into some of those specifics as the video goes on, but for now I'll say that I really didn't like the first episode of Banshee. Episode 2 was a different story. Now all the problems I had with episode 1 persisted, but by episode 2 I had adjusted to what Banshee was and was more than willing to stay along for the ride. And I would like to say that Banshee is a show that gets better and better with each episode, peaking in season 3, which is one of the best seasons of television that I've ever seen. Now Banshee is not a drama or a comedy or a sci-fi show, it's an action show, and for a television series, the action is amazing. There are a few action sequences that could even compete with what you see at the cinema. One of the reasons that Banshee is so beloved is due to it actually trying. You can tell that the people behind the scenes are actually trying to make a good TV show. They are actually trying to make an entertaining series for you to enjoy. They don't always succeed, but when they do, they really do. Now, not everything that I have to say about this show is positive. For instance, this show loves to throw in the most pornographic sex scenes that I've ever had to watch in the same room as my parents. Lucas Hood, the main character in this show, has so much sex in this show with so many different women. Literally, every time a new female character is introduced into this show, you're just counting down to see how long it takes for Hood to sleep with them. Honestly, there are so many boobs in this show. Either Anthony Starr was very happy to show up to work every day, or was very uncomfortable from the amount of times he and one of his co-stars had to get naked. It's not just how graphic the sex is in this show, but how long and unnecessary it is. These scenes go on forever. Game of Thrones has nothing on Banshee. Sometimes it feels like a quarter of an episode is dedicated to boning. After a certain point, it just becomes annoying due to how useless these scenes are. All I need to see is the characters getting out of bed together and putting their clothes on for me to understand, oh yes, these two just had intimate relations with one another. Knowing that they did doggy style adds nothing to the characters or story. Out of the 398 sex scenes in this show, only 2 of them were necessary. Fortunately, the sex scenes become less prominent as the show goes on, as one of the things this show is good at is trimming the fat and focusing on what makes the show good. But seriously, anytime Hood comes across a female, you should pull a stopwatch out to see how many seconds it takes until he's banging her. Another issue with this show is that not every storyline is particularly interesting. Now let's be fair, every show has this issue. Are you really going to argue that the storyline where Skylar had an affair with Ted in Breaking Bad was entertaining to watch? However, once again, Banshee is great at trimming the fat, and these storylines are usually mercifully put to rest so they can focus on the more interesting happenings of Banshee. I think I speak for everyone when I say that we're all glad that they put down the rabbit. Another not so serious issue I have is the CGI. Now this show actually won awards for the CGI present, and I'm sure for its time the CGI was excellent, but it's been nearly 10 years since Banshee started airing, and some of it is showing its age. Again, some of it. Some of it still looks pretty good, and I wonder whether there are any CGI moments that I didn't notice, but there were most certainly a few CGI sections that I did. It should be pretty clear that Banshee isn't perfect, but one area that it excels in is its characters. Now not every character is cut from the same cloth. I never cared about Carrie, and Dave always felt like this universe's version of Carl Grimes, but it's astonishing how many characters you grow to care about. Lucas Hood is one of the best protagonists I've seen in a TV show. Unsurprisingly, Anthony Starr delivers a wonderful performance as the character, and just like with Homelander, he fleshes out Hood and gives him both a hard edge, but also a soft, vulnerable side. Make no mistake, Lucas Hood is not the prototype for Homelander, and the two characters feel very different. At no point in this show did I feel like I was watching a depowered Homelander going around beating up Nazis instead of sleeping with them. A few facial expressions here and there maybe, but I always viewed Lucas Hood as Lucas Hood, and when I see Homelander, I only see Homelander. When an actor can do that, you know that they are something special. Lucas Hood is a man who doesn't play by the rules. He shouldn't be sheriff, but due to some unbelievable circumstances, he is. He rubs people the wrong way and doesn't care what anyone else thinks as long as he does what he believes is right. He is more criminal than cop, but that doesn't mean that he is a bad man. In fact, it is the good within him that draws those around him towards him. Even those that are skeptical of this new guy in town learn to trust and care for him. He is an action hero through and through, but that doesn't mean that he is this two-dimensional cardboard cutout of every macho man you've seen from an 80s film. Hood harbours within him deep vulnerability and sadness. His time in Banshee affected him and changed how he viewed himself. It's rare that you see the male lead overcome such dark emotions that he can't do nothing but curl up into a ball and cry his feelings out. If it wasn't for Job, then I would say with utmost certainty that Lucas Hood is the best character in Banshee. Job is an over-the-top transvestite who says more curse words than any technical lingo for a hacker. Anytime he's on screen, you can't help but smile. The show is smart to not overplay him and wise enough to know that the character can't be one note. There is an effort made to make Job feel more human, and like with Hood, you get to see a distressed, disturbed side to Job to go with his posturing. They say a film is only ever as good as its villain, and I guess the same is true of TV shows, because Banshee is filled to the brim with many memorable villains, from the looming Chayton to the aggressive Colonel Douglas to the disturbing Burton. Banshee is filled to the brim with wonderful villains, but one stands above them all, and that is Kai Proctor. Proctor is the type of villain you end up growing to love. I remember when he was first introduced, and my reaction was something along the lines of, really? This is the guy? This is the big bad of Banshee? But this guy doesn't seem that intimidating. Oh, how wrong I was. Proctor is one of the best villains on television. He is calculating, powerful, and above all else, an actual threat to the show's heroes. He is a former member of the Amish who has grown cruel and hateful, and has grown to have a stranglehold over the town of Banshee. Nothing gets done in Banshee without the knowledge of Proctor, and nothing gets done without his permission. But, just like with Hood and Job, Banshee is unafraid to show the character's softer side, and you're able to witness him undergo an introspection of who he is. This prevents the character from becoming detestable, despite the awful things that he does. He's a character that you hate to love, and it was interesting watching his relationship with his niece develop over time. Speaking of Rebecca, she's also a wonderful character. Unlike with Proctor, you actually get to see her descent into villainy. She goes from this rebellious Amish girl into this cold, almost heartless leader who even causes problems for her uncle. I like that the show recognises how inexperienced she is, and she makes many mistakes that cause a lot of problems for both her uncle, and the people of Banshee. Though once again she comes across as likeable. Despite her lust for power, there is still a kindness within her, and her relationship with Hood oftentimes showcases the best of her personality. Lucas Hood is the sheriff of Banshee, and the sheriff requires deputies. Fortunately, the deputies in Banshee are all extremely engaging to watch. Brock was the surprising standout of the deputies. He's initially the most hostile towards Hood, actively acknowledging his dislike for the man. However, he's also the character that changes the most after meeting Hood. It was quite funny to see this guy go from a by-the-books kind of guy to the cigar-smoking, sunglasses-wearing, feet up on the table Chad we see near the end of the show. He was the character I expected the least from, and he gave me more than most television characters. Emmett came across as the nicest of the deputies. He also had some issues with Hood stemming from his religious beliefs, but he always had Hood's back, as Hood always had his. His character was one of the most likeable, and it was saddening to watch as his character got pushed so far that he had to do something he wasn't proud of. Siobhan is a character you'll grow to care about the more you watch Banshee. Now, mild spoilers, but Siobhan is a woman, and the only female deputy in Banshee, at least initially. And remember what I said that happens to women who cross paths with Lucas Hood in this show? Siobhan is very kind. I know I've said that for pretty much every character in the show, but with Siobhan it's especially true. She looks after Hood and cares for him, and it's clear how much she means to Hood. I always got the impression that she never knew how much Hood loved her, and after watching the show that makes me sad. Lastly, there's Kurt Bunker. Just the premise for the character should excite you. Kurt Bunker is a former neo-Nazi who is trying to better himself and atone for his past misdeeds. He's haunted by his former beliefs and can't bring himself to truly forgive who he once was. He's polite and soft-spoken, but there's clearly something monstrous trapped within him, and you can see how much it pains him to keep it trapped within him. What's worse is his relationship with his brother. Kurt feels a great sense of responsibility for bringing his brother into the Nazi Brotherhood, and there's nothing he can do to bring him out of it. He's responsible for indoctrinating his brother and responsible for the evil monster that he became. These are just a few of the characters in Banshee, but they are the ones that stuck out to me as the show's best. I haven't even mentioned characters like Gordon, who starts out pretty weak but gets better as the show progresses. This show has a surprising amount of faces that would go on to become famous. Obviously, Anthony Starr went on to be Homelander, but the Prey Girl is in this. Tom Palfrey went on to star in Iron Fist and Ozark, and oh my god, it's the guy from Quantum of Solace. Every actor brings their A-game to this show and makes many of the characters memorable. This show also has no qualms killing off characters that you love, and by the end of the show you'll have definitely watched the character you care about die. Although this is one of those shows where they wait until the end of the season to kill off their characters, so you don't really have to worry about the characters being in any danger when they're in a life or death situation until episode 10 of each season. I've said that Banshee is a show that gets better and better, but I would like to highlight my mild disappointment with the fourth and final season. Now, to be clear, Season 4 isn't bad, nor is it the worst season of Banshee. That would most likely be the first. However, after Season 3, which is genuinely one of the best seasons of television out there, it is a tad disappointing. Banshee Season 3 is an explosive, action-packed installment that never takes its foot off the pedal, while Season 4 is slower and quieter, and is more of an experiment in itself, as opposed to the experimental episodes of the previous season. Sadly, it doesn't work as well as you would have hoped, but it's not without its highlights, such as the inclusion of the character of Veronica Dawson, who is such a great character that you wish she was around for the entire show. And, it must be said, unlike most shows out there, Banshee doesn't mess up its ending. It's poignant and satisfying and only serves to highlight how much you love the show as you sit there wishing there was another 4 seasons of this magnificent show. Banshee is the definition of an underrated show, and it is within your best interest to make sure you're not missing out on it any longer. Let me know what you think of either Banshee or The Boys in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.